the store and came back and went to the bathroom. When I came out the bathroom, I saw figures. I can't remember how many, but I just saw figures. And it's boom, boom, boom. I hit the ground. I'm dead. That was like my last thought in my head was, I'm dead.
Hello and welcome to the Nexus. That was Julian Betton describing how police shot him 9 times in his own home in South Carolina. He was very lucky to escape with his life. Both Julian and his lawyer are with us today to talk about the incident which happened in 2015, years before the deaths of Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery and others. By today's standards, the incident was barely reported, but resurfaced this year after Julian was awarded $11 million in compensation. The facts of the case are shocking. Police turned up at his house with a so-called knock and announce arrest warrant, but they didn't knock and they didn't announce who they were. Not realizing they were police, Mr. Betton went for his gun, but before he could fire, police shot at him 29 times. At least 9 bullets entered his body. He spent 6 weeks in an induced coma, and when he came round, he was partially paralyzed. Mr. Betton took the Myrtle Beach Police Department to court, and thanks to this video, he was able to prove the police had breached the terms of their warrant. And Julian Betton and his lawyer, Johnny McCoy, join us now. Julian, I know that even making media appearances like this is a challenge because you still have a great deal of pain from your injuries. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, my right leg doesn't bend at the knee, and I have sporadic nerve pain that we can't control, and it happens all day, every day. So most I can do is brace and hold on and wait and try to breathe it out.
Can I ask you to take us back to that day in April 2015 when the police came to your house? Just tell us what happened.
Well, I was coming out of my bathroom and I heard a loud bang, and I thought maybe one of my upstairs neighbors made it fail or something to fail in their apartment. And when I got into my living room, I seen people coming at me, so I reached for my gun, and that's how I woke up in a coma from a coma about 6 weeks later.
Right, and there was no knock and there was no announce about them being police?
No, sir, none at all.
Had they knocked and announced on your door, would you have behaved differently? How would you have reacted?
I would have given myself up. I mean, if they didn't have to knock and announce for me to give myself up. If I would have known it was the police, I would have given myself up.
And who did you think they were when they were standing there in front of you?
I didn't know who it was. It wasn't even a chance for me to figure out who it was. It was split seconds between them coming in my house and me being shot.
And so you went for your gun, which you say was in your waistband. Just wondering why you had it ready like that in your waistband.
Because I was recording music, and I normally keep my door unlocked, but I had been robbed the year prior, and I lost a lot of studio equipment because of that, because of my trusting in people. So I decided to put cameras on my porch and get a gun and keep in the house with me.
Now, the doctors say that you were hit with something like 9 bullets. Apparently, it's kind of difficult to determine because there were fragments in you as well. When you fell to the floor, you were presumably in shock, but still trying to talk to the police officers?
Yes, from the video I seen, I was talking to the officers, asking them to get me off of my left arm because that's the arm I had fell on, and that's all I could feel was the pain from there. And I was telling them that I didn't know who they were when they came in the house, and if I did shoot at them, that I didn't mean to because I didn't know who they were.
Right, and this is video that came from their body cameras, which were turned on only once they were in your house. Is that right?
Not once they were in my house. Once they were rendering aid, they wanted to be shown that they tried to do everything they could to help me survive, even though they expected me to die.
And what did they find in your apartment when they came to arrest you?
Just marijuana.
And was it a significant quantity? How much would it have as a street value?
Street value, maybe $1,500.
What again?
Even if they would have made a clean arrest and they would have brought him out in handcuffs, if he would have surrendered, they would have knocked in and announced, Julian would have gotten community service. That's what they showed up to do. They showed up to execute a search warrant, an arrest warrant on a house for a guy who would have gotten community service for his crimes. Just so we're clear.
And they were acting on information that they got from a confidential informant, someone who said that they had bought marijuana from you. Can you tell us about that person and how they knew so much about you?
It was actually a friend of my girlfriend's, and her father had died when she was in the military, and that messed with her mind a little bit. So they gave her a discharge, and oh my goodness, they gave her a discharge, and when she came home, she said she had an insomnia and problems sleeping. So I was trying to help her out, and I guess, got pulled over and had some with her. And they told her that if she didn't give up the person who gave it to her, that she was going to lose her military disability benefits.
And had she seen a weapon at your house?
Yes.
Right. What kind of weapon was it? The handgun? And also, was there an
Yeah.
automatic rifle in your property?
No, it was not an automatic rifle. It was a semi-automatic rifle. It was
Right.
a AR-15 and a 45 caliber handgun.
You were in a medically induced coma for something like 6 weeks. What were your first thoughts when you came round?
What happened? Why am I in the hospital? That was pretty much it. What happened and why am I in the hospital? And there was a cop by my bedside. They had a cop by my bedside, and he told me I had been in a shootout with the police. I mean, I had an argument for a minute because I told him like I wouldn't shoot at the police. That's not something I would do. So tell me what really happened. And he was like, no, you really been in a shootout with the police. So that's how I found out what happened.
Yeah. And then when did they tell you that you were going to be charged with various offenses relating to pointing your gun at the police?
That was in the hospital when I was talking to the officer. It was pretty obvious that I was under arrest and being charged with something.
Jonathan, you became Julian's lawyer. You found out about the case while he was still in hospital. So how did you manage to prove that not only did your client not fire his gun, but the police did not fulfill the terms of their warrant? They didn't knock on the door. They didn't announce that they were police.
Miracle. The police do this stuff all the time, as we're being able to find out now. You know, with the emergence of the iPhone and the video features on phones, we're now being able to see it more and more regularly. And with Ring doorbells and with people putting cameras on their doorsteps, we're being able to see it more and more. But it's a miracle that Julian got robbed almost a year prior to the incident where he was almost murdered by the police. He got robbed and bought a surveillance system and put it on his front porch. When I encountered Julian the first several times and asked him what happened, what took place, he never mentioned the video cameras. I don't think he knew that they were working. I think that he put them up there as a deterrent. It's a miracle. It's a miracle. If more people took the opportunity seriously to record what takes place outside the front of their home or engagements with police, you wouldn't be asking, how did you prove it? We would be seeing it over and over again. And you'd be saying, well, you know, why aren't we doing anything about this?
And you've also mentioned that the police officer's own testimony was inconsistent.
Yeah. So, you know, how do you make a liar angry? Keep asking him questions. And that's what we did. We started asking questions before the video surfaced. So we had several preliminary hearings in the criminal case, in the criminal side of it, before there was a video and before we knew that Julian had a very big civil claim against the city. And when we were asking them under oath what happened, they all said, well, the other guy knocked. I didn't knock. Somebody else knocked. And we sat there and we said, well, who knocked? Nobody said, I'm the one who knocked and announced, including the only guy who got close to the door, who opened the screen door. He said somebody else knocked. So, you know, and in their statements that they gave to the investigators, you know, they do a in-house investigation. They all said the same thing. Well, this guy knocked. None of them said I knocked. So we knew we were on to something.
Let's listen to one of the officers who you mentioned there, giving a statement to the internal police investigator.
So I pulled the screen door, and out of habit, I announced police search warrant. Other guys started to stack up on the porch in a kind of like a formation, preparing to enter. Chad Guess, he had the ram actually in his hands. He was going to be the person to ram the door by force with if there was no answer at the door. So he comes up to the top of the porch, goes up to the front door, and he knocks and announces police search warrant.
When you compare that officer's statement to the video, it's very clear that the man with the battering ram did not knock. Clearly, the evidence very, very crucial here. Johnny, how did you get your hands on the video?
During the criminal portion, which is the first portion of the cases to unravel, we had what's called a Brady motion, and you send off and you ask for all the evidence in the criminal case. So they have to give you everything, and they take that pretty seriously in criminal court. So one of the officers, actually the officer with the battering ram, showed up to my office several weeks, if not a few months after the initial criminal discovery came, and he had a DVR box in his hand. The DVR box didn't have any cords, or he didn't say anything about what was on it. We had a casual, pleasant conversation. He dropped it off and said, "All right, we'll see you later." Nobody told us there was a video. So I had to get a friend of mine who, knows a little bit about computers, and we ordered some cords, and took us several hours, if not days. And we finally got the picture to pull up on the screen. And I was just floored. I couldn't believe what I was witnessing. But at the same time, we knew that they were hiding something all along.
One of the officers, Mark McIntyre, actually came out pretty much as a whistleblower. He resigned. Tell us about that.
He's the only one who told the consistent truth throughout. And by the time we got around to speaking to him, he had already left the force. He was a 20-year veteran from another police department. He came into the city of Myrtle Beach. He witnessed what took place on these raids. He said that this is what happens all the time. They don't knock. They don't announce. They go in. They're commandos. They're violent. And he said, I had a conversation with my wife, and I just couldn't do it anymore. So he left before he even really blew the whistle. We went and talked to him, and he told us exactly what happened. And his statement was the only one that added up with the video, all the videos. Now, remember, all the officers turned off their body cameras. Some of them left them in their glove boxes before the shooting. And then all of a sudden, magically, when Julian's on the floor and they're over him applying tourniquets, their cameras turned back on simultaneously.
Johnny, just to play devil's advocate for a moment, from the police's perspective, they knew that Julian had a conviction, a drugs conviction before, for possessing cocaine, enough to deal, and the confidential informant had told them that he had weapons in the house. Do you think any of that is mitigation for how they acted when they came through the door?
So the police officers actually had a surveillance team in place, and I'll put surveillance team in quotes. Julian walked right by him in an open field on the way to a convenience store. No guns, nothing visible, out in the open. The police officers, when they shot at Julian, they actually pierced the wall to his apartment several times. One of the bullets crossed a basketball court and entered an apartment across the basketball court. 3 o'clock is also when school's let out, and April is also still in school session. So to say that the police officers could be given some sort of benefit of the doubt, they did everything possible wrong.
Clearly, Johnny, there is an asymmetrical outcome from this raid. We have a conviction, a second conviction now for Julian, but the officers who lied about the raid, and also the department had to pay out millions of dollars in compensation, they retain their jobs and there's no criminal prosecution. Why is that?
Because that's the law. That's the way it is in the United States of America right now. And all of the officers in Julian's case, all of them retained their jobs. If they didn't retain them, they just moved to another police department. None of them were disciplined. As a matter of fact, the lead commander in charge said, "I'm not disciplining him for anything. It was a perfect raid. This guy is still an investigator. He's still signing warrants for the Georgetown Solicitor's Office. The guy with the battering ram, all of these guys, still work in their same positions, and they're still signing warrants today. And it's
so why didn't the state prosecutor bring a case against them then?
Because the state prosecutor is the one who was trying to prove that Julian Betton did something wrong. This is all one team that we're battling up against here. And until people start actually going after and prosecuting police officers for lying, and we have people being prosecuted for obstruction of justice for a phone call, for not telling the police what time they got home. Of course, the Roger Stone famous one. We've got several people lying to the police going to prison. And then you have a judge ruling that these police officers lied emphatically under oath. They lied to the investigators. They lied to put Julian Betton in a wheelchair in prison. And nothing took place. And the reason that nothing took place is because nobody's watching the watchers. The people who are in charge of prosecuting are on the same team as the people who need to be prosecuted. So until there's either laws written by the legislator that say, if you lie on an incident report, it's a misdemeanor. If you lie and somebody gets charged with a crime, it's a felony. Until that takes place, we're going to be in the same hole. But what they're really doing, what the city's really doing, what the police department's really doing is they're playing the odds that these officers are not going to be involved in another crime, in another case like this. And those are bad odds to play, because if it happens again, it's going to be a $100 million case.
Julian, we're coming towards the end of the interview. I'd just like to ask you what you hoped would come out of your case.
Yes, I wanted some of the police policies to change, not just for the African American community, but for the entire United States. Like he says, policies and rules in place, like the police union, that keeps them out of jail and off of paperwork when they've done something wrong. But yeah, that's pretty much what I wanted to see, with some policies change, so the police could be held accountable for stuff like this.
Julian Betton and Johnny McCoy, thank you so much for your time here on the Nexus. We're going to take a look at the issue of serving warrants now from another perspective, from the police's perspective. It is one of the most dangerous duties that they're asked to perform.
We're learning more today about the veteran Cleveland police officer who was shot and killed.
2 LASD deputies were shot by a suspect.
Newly released video shows a shootout between 2 Pennsylvania troopers.
Being a cop is one of the most dangerous jobs in America. Take a look at this map of America in 2020. The states colored dark red are where police officers have been killed, 106 so far this year. Every year, the fatality rate for police, represented by the blue lines, is far higher than for other occupations on average. There are a range of scenarios in which officers have lost their lives, including chasing suspects, responding to domestic abuse calls, and yes, serving warrants. Over the past decade, 73 officers were killed nationwide while attempting to serve warrants.
And an officer serving an arrest warrant has no idea what's on the other side of that door. It could be a person with a gun, on drugs, or somebody willing to die to avoid arrest.
These difficult situations are known as high-risk warrants, and the average detective and his team may not have the training to deal with such scenarios. And that is where, in an ideal world, a police department can call on their elite unit, so-called SWAT teams, special weapons and tactics. Recruiting the best of the best officers, they're fitter, faster, and better marksmen than their contemporaries. They're given more powerful weapons and are trained to perform even in the most dangerous scenarios, entering a drugs den, a hostage crisis, even a terror attack. Which begs the question, why aren't all high-risk warrants handled by SWAT teams? Well, our next guest, Jim Baglica, was a police officer in Boston for some 32 years and spent half his career in a regional SWAT unit. He's been involved in the protection detail for 5 presidents, and his team was instrumental in capturing one of the Boston bombers back in 2013. Jim, you've seen the video from the Julian Betton operation. How would a SWAT team do things differently?
Well, so what you saw in the Julian video was what's called a dynamic entry. Dynamic entries are done with surprise, aggression, and speed, and there's a lot of moving parts to them. It's very technical, and it really needs to be accomplished by a professional SWAT team.
So what's the difference between a SWAT team and the narcotics unit that often carries out these kinds of raids?
Yeah, there's a big difference. You know, you're talking a group of detectives and or patrol officers trying to accomplish this very technical high risk entry, and they're, you know, they probably had some basic training on that, but it's certainly not enough to accomplish this in the correct manner.
So what elements of your training would come into play in a dynamic situation, a high pressure situation like this?
The success of a mission like this is no one gets hurt. That's the bottom line. That's why you call in a SWAT team, because it's high risk, it's very dangerous, and you don't want anyone hurt. No officers, no civilians, no suspects. And a competent SWAT team goes through hundreds of these missions year after year, and no one gets hurt. That's how you know that you're a good SWAT team, when no one gets injured in missions like this. You know, it's all about training, repetition, knowing what you're doing, knowing what your mission is, what the mission of the whole team is. And, you know, they say, you know, everybody has a fight plan until you get punched in the face. And that's what we prepare for. Expect the unexpected and know how to react to that.
But also, you would have presumably followed the warrant instructions, whatever they are, whether they're no knock or knock and announce. Is that right?
Correct. You know, if you've got a knock and announce warrant, you have to abide by that. And so, you know, let me just say that a no-knock warrant is given because it's the safest way to serve this high-risk entry. You want to catch these people off guard. You want to surprise them and just overwhelm their senses to the point where they don't know how to react. So if they don't have time to react, they won't have time to grab a weapon, and we won't have to then, you know, act to protect ourselves. So
now, clearly,
you know, the fact that serving a warrant midday, how are you going to catch somebody by surprise midday? You know, if we were going to serve a high risk warrant like this, we would probably do it at 6 a.m. when it's still dark, when people are still in bed, their brain is already hazy from sleep. And when we come in with surprise aggression and speed, they don't have time to even think, what am I going to do? We're going to catch them sitting up in their bed, empty-handed, and they won't have the opportunity to bring violence toward us.
Then why aren't SWAT teams, clearly more effective and successful, used to issue all high-risk warrants?
Well, that's a good question. You know, back in the day, back in the 90s, when I was working on the drug unit, you know, we always served our own warrants, high risk or not. It didn't matter. You know, the detectives do all the back work, all the boring surveillance, and, you know, they put in hundreds and hundreds of hours to build a case. And so you could call that practice. And then actually serving the warrant, that's game day. So, you know, you don't want to practice and then never get to play the game. So, you know, effectively what it is that's the payoff. You don't want to give up the payoff. But these detectives have to get it through their head that they should not be serving high-risk warrants like this. You need to call in a team. You need to give it up. Sorry, you can't play the game. I know it's cool, but give it up to the professionals.
And even SWAT teams, though, are criticized for being too militarized these days. The weapons are too powerful. Do you think there is a problem there?
No, there's a reason why law enforcement has stepped up their game, because the bad guys have stepped up their game. If a bad guy pulls a knife on me, I'm not going to pull a knife on him, right? I'm there to win. So if the bad guys have big weapons, then law enforcement has to have even bigger weapons.
Jim Baglica, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us here on The Nexus. And thank you also at home and on your phones for watching. Remember, you can see this episode and all our previous episodes on our channel on YouTube. Just type in Nexus TRT World. Until next week then, goodbye.